Some stories start in the most unexpected ways. This one begins with what seems like just a simple student prank in Moscow. But as you'll see, you pull on that one little thread, and the whole thing unravels to reveal this absolutely terrible secret. A secret about the tragedy of an entire nation.
And it all comes back to this one single word, barbarian. Our narrator, a guy named Akím, remembers it as just a word he'd throw around carelessly when he was young. He had no idea that years later, that same word would become the key to unlocking a massive, heartbreaking piece of history that hit very close to home.
So let's jump back in time. We're in Moscow, it's the 1960s, we're at a really prestigious film school, and this is where a friendship starts between two guys who couldn't be more different, Akím and Andrei.
Okay, picture this. The atmosphere is just electric. It's a crowded restaurant packed with young, creative types, all arguing about art, and yeah, there are plenty of drinks going around. And it's on a night just like this that Akím decides he needs to prove how, well, barbaric he can be. See, there's this military major at a table nearby who keeps shooting this smirk their way, and for Akím, that's a challenge.
And things escalate fast. Akím stands up, cool as you like, walks over to the major's table and asks the woman with him for a dance. But he doesn't dance with her. Nope, he just kisses her. And then he turns around and calmly walks back to his seat. You can just imagine the air going out of the room. Suddenly, this furious mountain of a man in a military uniform is on his feet and heading straight for their table.
But right when you think a huge fight is about to break out, something totally wild happens. Akím's friend Andrei just calmly walks up to the major, whispers something in his ear, and that's it. It's over. The anger just drains from the major's face. He turns around and leaves. I mean, what on earth could you possibly say to stop a guy like that?
Well, here's the secret. The reason Andrei could get away with anything was his father, a lieutenant general in the KGB. That connection basically made Andrei untouchable. This is a guy who would build 10-story towers of glasses in restaurants for fun or hide in a closet and just start singing opera. His favorite thing to do? Walk up to a cop on the street and just rip a button right off his uniform. All he had to do was whisper his father's rank, and poof, any problem just vanished into thin air.
So after another one of their run-ins with the police, the friends find themselves needing cash and fast. Andrei decides to take Akím to his aunt's apartment. And this visit, well, it's about to open a door to a past that is so distant and so terrifying. The second Manana, who's this tiny little woman with stark white hair, finds out that Akím is from Kazakhstan. She just freezes. It's like the name of the country itself triggers something awful deep inside her.
And then, things get even stranger. At some point, Manana mentions she's 47 years old. But then a moment later, she adds, actually, I'm 470. And, this wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It felt more like a cry for help, a scream about this immense weight she was carrying, the kind of burden that ages you more than time ever could. Akím, of course, leaves her apartment just completely baffled. What was that all about?
The next time they visit, that secret doesn't just come out, it explodes. Manana's broken memories all come rushing back and spill out into this full, horrifying confession. Her story pulls us all the way back to the Altai Mountains in Kazakhstan in the early 1930s. This was the time of forced collectivization, which led to the Ashar-Shillik, a catastrophic famine that would kill millions of Kazakhs.
She starts talking about a big assignment. She confesses that when she was a very young nurse, she was part of this state-run campaign. They travel from village to village, always with a military guard, and their job was to give injections to the entire Kazakh population. And this is where the horrifying truth comes out. These weren't medicines. It was, for all intents and purposes, a biological attack. She said after the injections, terrible diseases would just rip through the villages. But the most chilling part? There was a special drug designed to completely break people's will, to make them utterly and completely submissive.
As she's telling this story, she just completely breaks down. You realize she's been carrying this guilt her entire life. She knows that for what she did, forgiveness is impossible. Akím leaves her apartment totally shaken. But here's the thing. Even with this confession, the full picture, the true scale of this tragedy wouldn't become clear to him for another 20 years. All right, now we have to jump forward again, 2 whole decades, because the final piece of this terrifying puzzle is about to click into place.
It's really incredible when you think about it, right? How a single terrible story can just ripple across 50 years. You have the crime in the 1930s, which leads to the confession in the 60s, but the final shocking revelation doesn't happen until the 1980s.
So fast forward to 1983. Akím is on a work trip in the Kazakh city of Karatau, and it's here that a chance meeting with an old Kurdish man named Mahmed is going to provide the final clue.
Mahmed starts telling this story about the day Stalin died. He says he saw two female geologists on a cliff, just weeping hysterically. They were screaming that their great leader was gone and were about to throw themselves off. Mahmed managed to grab them and hold them back, saving their lives. And what was his reward? One of them screamed at him, calling him an enemy of the people for getting in the way.
And then Mahmed remembers one last crucial detail. He says the name of one of the girls, who was Armenian, sounded a lot like the words Monakasha. You know, like semolina porridge.
And in that single instant, it all clicks for Akím. It was her. It was Miana. That old man's story, told in a random city decades later, had just closed a terrible circle. A story that began with a student friendship in Moscow was now forever tied to the history of a national catastrophe.
And so, all of this whole winding, tragic story brings us right back to that one word that started it all, the word that sort of framed this entire discovery.
I mean, just think about the contrast here. On one hand, you've got Akím's barbarism, a provocative kiss, a silly student prank. On the other hand, you have the system's barbarism, a calculated biological attack on an entire population, a crime against humanity that killed millions. The scale is just staggering. It really shows how personal guilt and national tragedy can stay buried for decades, only to come to the surface through these random chance encounters.
So that leaves us with this final question, doesn't it? Who is the real barbarian in this story? Is it the student just acting tough? Is it the young nurse so fanatically devoted to a leader that she becomes a tool for a horrific crime? Or is it the faceless system itself that creates and enables them both?